And the purpose is to reveal in as short a span of time as possible the nature of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. This passage concerns the Beatitudes, which means the teachings. Matthew chapter 5. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, if you ever want to know what Jesus taught that made him such a valuable person in the history of the world, that set the calendar apart, BC and AD originally, now it's called something else, divided the calendar. Here it is. Jesus said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This should encourage some folks who are weary in many ways. Poor in spirit. You'll have to ponder that, because you could take it psychologically, you could take it emotionally, pure emotions, or you could take it on a spiritual plane. But blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. My wife and I relate to this because our son passed away just barely over a month ago. And as they say, parents should never outlive their children, but sometimes it happens. But blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. It's not the proud, boisterous one that probably epitomized best by maybe a boxer in our recent past who used to claim that he was the greatest. And he would talk about how pretty he was and that he still had a pretty face and very proud. We also have some politicians who are very, very proud. Jesus said, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. If you hunger and thirst for a right relationship with God, you will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. And right now, when we have so much happening by way of military conflict in today's world, the world needs to relearn the lessons of mercy. If they are unmerciful, apparently they will not receive mercy. I think back to when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And yes, folks, I remember it. I'm old enough. Come this June, the year 2022, I'll be 87. I was 6.5 years old when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. I remember like this morning, the word coming over the radio through the static. Radios were pretty primitive then. And I saw my mom and dad look at my two oldest brothers. I was the baby of the family. Two brothers who were old enough to go, and they went. So I knew about World War II. And I knew that as I followed it growing up, that Adolf Hitler was not merciful. He was the opposite of that. His end was not one of mercy. Apparently, he took a coward's way out. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. I'd like to add a note here that Jesus meant they would see God, not his judgment, not his wrath. They would see God. And when you see God, you see love. It's pure, perfect love. That's when you see God, that's what you see, pure and perfect love. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. I guess even today, there will be Russians and Ukrainians meeting, trying to find a pathway for innocent civilians to make their way out of the Ukraine. But if you'll notice, We don't talk about Ukrainian military being innocent, but they didn't shoot first. So the Ukrainians, they were at least trying to find a way to get civilians out. Blessed are the peacemakers. They will be called children of God. Whether or not they succeed, they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now we're getting down to where the rubber meets the road. If you are persecuted for righteousness' sake, that's an assurance that you have the kingdom of heaven. Now I know in the realm of Christianity or Christendom and doctrinal stuff and so forth, we have all kinds of people who say, well, here are the requirements for heaven. You have to be saved just like I was saved. I had a lay leader in a church a number of years ago. He didn't think anybody was saved unless they got saved exactly like he did. We have some who say, well, in order to be saved, you've got to be baptized, but it's got to be baptized a certain way, and we have to do it. The list goes on and on and on. But yet we have some of you watching this who are secular Christians, pure secularists. My heart goes out to you too, because God loves you. And you don't have to agree with everything I'm saying, but somewhere along the line, life comes to an end. If you don't believe it, take a look around in every community. You'll find a funeral home, and you'll find cemeteries. And for some reason, the people who lived 200 years ago are not around today. And the Bible, which you may not believe, and that's okay, does state a truth that it is appointed unto a man, and by the way, ladies, that means women too, once to die. Everybody's going to die physically. And you're going to turn to dust. Or if they burn your body, you'll be ashes. Have you ever seen the ashes of a cremated person, the cremains? Fine as dust. Throw it up in the air and the slightest breeze will blow it everywhere. Get it on your clothes. You can't brush it off hardly. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So, if you are in right relationship with God and you're persecuted, heaven is yours. Now, if you're not in right relationship with God and you're persecuted, you have no promise. Now, blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Now, Jesus is saying this. Again, my secular friends, you may not believe in Jesus. You may believe that he was a historical person, and you may not believe that he existed at all. I don't know where you are on that, but I know where this is. These people, and multitudes since this was written, they believed it. He said, if they revile you, that is, if they have bad things to say about you, and they persecute you, and say all kinds of evil things about you, well then, if they do that because of me, then rejoice and be glad, because you got a great reward in heaven. Now, if they do it not because of Jesus, that's a whole different story. He doesn't speak to that. Anyway, the rest of that says something about the prophets. I've read that to you with a little bit of exegetical insight, a little drawing out of ideas and truth to really set the stage to tell you that if you know what Jesus taught, and you know it, and you know it, and you know it, and you know it, eventually you will develop what's called the mind of Christ. You see, having been a student of college, 4 years for a degree, and then I went back an extra year and took some more classes that I wanted, and then I had some time in a graduate school in one area, and then I went to graduate school in another area, so I had about 4 years of graduate school, and then I had 2 years postgraduate school, and then I did some teaching for nearly 10 years on the college level. I can tell you that if you are taught and taught and taught and taught, if you learn and learn and learn and learn, eventually it becomes a part of you. For instance, since I taught philosophy and ethics and psychology and a number of things on the college level, one area that I really had concentrated in teaching a great deal was the field of ethics. Consequently, I have some ideas stuck in my head. For instance, I have nihilism stuck in my head. That word. It means that there are no standards. There's no set value of on anything. It's whatever you say. It's like someone has a great work of art. It's worth whatever you can get for it. It's worth whatever value you place on it. I think about cryptocurrency. I have yet to find anybody to explain to me cryptocurrency. It has no backing. No, I don't care what they tell you. It's not backed up by anything. It's smoke and mirrors. Sorry, my secular investors, but it's smoke and mirrors. It only has the value that you say it has. True wealth comes out of the earth. The earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof. So says this book. And my secular friends, again, you may not agree, but there's a lot of truth in here. You think there's some truth in Shakespeare? I do too. You think there's some truth in the Rubaiyat by Omar Khayyam, as translated by F. Gerald Fitzgerald? Yeah, there's some truth in it. It goes like this. I sometimes think that never blows so red the roses where some buried Caesar bled, that every hyacinth in the garden wears dropped in her lap from some once lovely head. There was a veil through which I could not see. There was a door to which I had no key. A little while there was of me and thee, and then no more of me and thee. I'm not a genuine fan of Omar Khayyam or of F. Gerald Fitzgerald, but I remember that, and I have to tell you, I agree. A little while there is of me and thee, and then what we see of me and thee, after a while, there is no more of me and thee. So, nihilism, yeah, I know about it. It's stuck in my head. No value except what you put on it. I think about hedonism. It's stuck in my head. The love of pleasure. You secular folks, and those of you who remember anything from an ethics class in college or university, you know hedonism is where you say pleasure is to be desired and pain is to be avoided at all costs. You wonder why we have such a pleasure-bent society. Everybody's after pleasure. What's going to be your source of pleasure when something worse than COVID comes along and America's pastime, baseball, the stadiums are empty. And then along comes the fall of the year, late summer, and the football stadiums are vacant. And before that season is over, along comes the professional basketball season and college basketball, high school basketball, and even grade school basketball. And those auditoriums, those gymnasiums are vacant. What are you going to do? When the movie theaters are vacant, what if your TV doesn't work and you don't get all that stuff? Oh, we got your cell phone. Well, what if your cell phone becomes a stupid phone? What are you going to do then? You see, there is a reckoning time. Where are you going to have pleasure if you've been depending on all these outside sources for pleasure? And we have people who worship pleasure. They spend billions of dollars in this country every year on pleasure. There are guys that can't write a decent sentence who are paid millions of dollars a year because they can throw a football, catch a football, they can break somebody's bones, or they can dribble a basketball, or whatever. Why? Because there's still a little bit of the Roman in us up in the Colosseum, watching people torture other people for pleasure. Isn't that kind of weird? My secular friends, isn't it kind of weird that you can rejoice and take pleasure in other people's suffering? At what point do you stop it? At what point do you draw the line and say, no more? You know, there's some things stuck in my head because I learned it, and I learned it, and I learned it, and I learned it, and I learned it. So I submit to you that if you will learn what Jesus taught, whether you like it or not, you'll be a better person. And whether you like it or not, suddenly you begin to think like Christ, have the mind of Christ. For instance, you'll be saying the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Well, yeah, Jesus is quoted as saying that, but you know, he was quoting somebody else because Jesus learned and learned and learned and learned and learned some things that came out in his teachings. He's known as the greatest teacher that ever lived. So there are some things that you learn and learn and learn and learn, and you'll develop the mind of Christ, and whether you like it or not, you'll be a better person because of it. And then when you walk around long enough with the mind of Christ, suddenly you begin to think like God. And let me illustrate it to you this way. All the things that I learned in preparation to be a college professor, and then I taught. So I learned what I learned, had that mind where I knew what hedonism was and nihilism and other isms, too many to mention. After a while, with that mind, that's how I began to think like a college professor. I began to see stuff in the form of a syllabus. I began to plan life like a syllabus. I began to think in terms of having people in front of me that would be taking notes while I talked. Thinking like a professor. Put it over here in my world where I speak a little Christianese. Hope you secularists will realize that we all have our language. But know what Jesus taught. Have the mind of Christ. Think like God. It'll revolutionize your life. The next time we get together, I may very well tell you how this book came to pass, where it came from. And you'll find it interesting because it's more than just happen to be the version that you're using. We're going to go back to its roots. I'm going to tell you where it came from, how it developed, so that you'll get a curiosity and you're going to think, I want to read about that. And you'll get it, and I'm going to tell you where to read. That's it for now. I want you all to stay blessed. Until next time, this is Paul Collins. Go to drpaulcollins.com. Send me a note and I'll answer you. Thank you.